Hello, everyone, and welcome to our event on Turkish drones, assessing capability, goals, and implication. I'm Anise Bassiri-Tabrizi. I'm a senior research fellow at the International Security Studies Department at RUSI, where I also lead the Unpacking the MENA program. I'm particularly delighted to be hosting this conversation today. Drones, in particular armed drones, have been a significant part of the program's research and activities. A few years back, we published a report and an interactive map showcasing the proliferation and use of armed drones by countries in the Middle East. And to this date, this remains one of the most comprehensive outlook on the topic when it comes to the Middle East region. I welcome you to check this report and the website at drones.rusi.org. Already in that study, which dates back to 2018, Turkey emerged as one of the most interesting countries when it comes to the usage and proliferation of drones. Together with Iran and Israel, Turkey is one of the countries that has a very advanced indigenous program, differently from other countries in the region which differently purchase these drones from China. Turkey also emerged as one of the countries for which drones most significantly affected its calculation and power projection in the region. Obviously, since the study took place, this trend has even increased further through Turkey's involvement in conflicts such as Nagorno-Karabakh, the East Med, and Libya, where drones have played a significant part. So talking about the usage of drones is very much something that is significant when it comes to Turkey. And it's very much linked also to the broader question about whether and how Turkey foreign policy is changing. Unpacking the MENA has had a webinar on this issue back in March. And the foreign policy of Turkey really is something that we are looking very closely, especially with our senior associate fellow, Ziya Meral, who is going to chair this conversation. So all this to say that I think today's discussion is really timely, very important, and I really want to thank our partner, the Circle Foundation, for facilitating it. The Circle Foundation is an independent, non-partisan think tank. It's based in London, and it's dedicated to innovative studies on national, regional, and international issues concerning Turkey and the UK-Turkey relations. I want also to thank our chair, Ziya Meral, and our speakers, which our chair will introduce, for what promises to be really a unique conversation on this issue, because we'll have perspective from the private sector as well as from experts within Turkey and beyond. So really, before passing this on to Ziya, I just wanted to thank you for joining us and encourage everyone to sign up to our newsletter and to follow us on Twitter at ISS_RUSI. This way you can stay up to date with our ongoing activities and outputs. Thanks again, and enjoy the discussion. Ziya, the screen is all yours.
Thank you so much, Anise, and thanks to everybody who joined us. We have more than 200 people or so signed up to this conversation, and I assume more people will join in a few minutes. As Anise already mentioned, one of the most fascinating and exciting things to observe in defense and security analysis and geopolitics of the Middle East has been Turkey's increased defense national capabilities, and how it sought to incorporate these into its foreign policy, its defense engagement, its posture on all of these issues. And technologically, we have seen a tremendous leap. We've been accustomed to Turkish missile companies and armored vehicle producers to do a great job. And all of a sudden, we had Turkey's unmanned vehicles, drones, emerging and entering to a whole new level. We have seen the reports that Poland is seeking to purchase a decent number of them, which would be the first NATO country, which shows the level that Turkish drones and its capabilities is reaching and its appeal to partners and those around the world as well too. But obviously such technological leaps and dominance that they assume in defense and security policies of a country have a lot of implications regionally and globally. So it is really time to discuss where things are with Turkish drone and advanced warfare technologies, what this means for its region, and what this means for NATO, and what this means for the UK, and global conversations that we are having on today's war fighting. We are thrilled to have 4 brilliant panelists to unpack a lot of these, starting from the very person who's been fundamental on advancement of Turkish drone technologies, Haluk Bayraktar, and we're so glad that he could join us in his busy schedule. We will, after him, go to Dr. Can Kasapoglu, who is a leading observer of Turkish defense and defense policy and capabilities with Istanbul-based think tank EDAM. And then we will, from there, go to United Arab Emirates and Dr. Ross, who will then unpack some of the regional implications of how the adaptation of Turkish warfare capabilities impacted issues in the region, how it has been perceived and what it meant for developments. And from him, and we will step back from the Turkey and the Middle East context and reflect on the global trends that we observe on drones and remote warfare, and what all of these questions that emerges from these. And we will then bring in Ulrike Franke, who is not a stranger to a lot of you in RUSI, to unpack some of the macro level discussions and implications of Turkish development. So without further ado, what I ask each of the speakers is to start our conversation with perhaps 5 to 7 minutes of their preliminary remarks. First, we'll start with Haluk Bey and his experiences of being a groundbreaking pioneer and really taking Turkey a whole another level. And from there, we will then come to John to reflect on what this means for Turkish defense and security and foreign policies, and then we'll involve the regional and global affairs too. Haluk Bey, let's start with you. And I know you're a busy man, and it is extremely great that you could be with us. Your story, your ambition, your push has been fascinating and noteworthy to observe. And I think what you have achieved in such a short amount of time has been really remarkable. What led you to this? And how do you see the development and advancement of Turkish drone capacities and capabilities?
Right. Yeah, thank you, dear Mr. Meral. And I would like to thank RUSI and Circle Foundation for organizing this event. And I would extend my greetings to all panelists. So let me while I'm talking, share with you my presentation as well, if you see it on screen right now. So as you know, drones are really popular in the recent times, but actually it's a result of the Turkish ecosystem. It's a result of the last 20 years of efforts and organized and sustainable strategy. And along with UAVs as well, there are a lot of different results regarding, whether it be a Navy, a marine platform or land platform or aerial platform or subsystems. So it is actually the result of the Turkish ecosystem built on with years effort, where you have the end users on one side, you have the procurement authorities, and then the suppliers, main integrators and subcontractors, and the supporting academic and industry, academic and institutional base actually. So it's actually a result of it. And when you look at, I would like to briefly show you the progress of Turkish defense industry in the last 40 years. Actually, it goes back to, with the establishment of Turkish Republic, but I will just cover the last 40 years. Turkey was, after the Cyprus operation, Turkey was started, doing some indigenous attempts and establishments, and then moved into direct procurement and joint manufacturing. But after the year of 2000, there is a huge mobilization and there is a shift in the strategy of Turkey. So rather than directly procuring systems from Western sources or different sources, but rather focus on design and development of this. And as a result, I'll just give you a very brief result. Like 20 years ago, it was about 20 companies in the defense industry, but now it's more than 2,000 companies. The portfolio of the contracts 20 years ago were not like maybe $6 billion, but right now it's a running portfolio of $60 billion and ongoing defense projects of more than 700. So, this is kind of the result of it. And right now, based on this, we see the resulting success stories. It's not only the drones, but also with smart munitions and all other components. And actually, this is established by a really sustainable, will and direct support of Turkish defense industry to the private and semi-governmental organizations to design and develop, and for all life cycle phases, there was a systematic support on that regard. So it's not only the systems, but a strategy that is covering the subsystems, that's covering the main critical components and technologies. So it's a result of all these efforts. And while Turkey was doing this, it's very interesting. And the years between 1990s and 2000s, it was mostly direct procurement. And when you look at these years, it was about 4% of GDP were spent on military procurement. This statistics was taken from the CIPRI research, and even though you might think that investing in the research, prototyping, development might consume lots more resources of a country, but when you look at the numbers, it's not that way. You notice that there's a decreasing ratio of GDP spent on military expenditure, an increasing level of localization and indigenous products, and you're getting much more better results with it. So you see that obviously with the cumulative aggregate growth rates on different time periods, and you see the result of it in Turkey. I know it's very short time, so I will just jump onto UAV side very quickly. Turkey has a history with UAVs, and unfortunately that history motivated and caused Turkey to develop a new strategy, and based on that new strategy, we just today see the results of it. So Turkey was, before procuring from US, from Israel, these systems were denied when Turkey wanted to procure the system. So then Turkey decided to make a new attempt, a new approach, and today we see the results of it actually. And when you look at our close region or our periphery, we notice that these are really heavily used assets. Unmanned systems are heavily used assets, as they can take risk, as they are really very active and game changer elements. So they are heavily used on our neighbors. Baykar, I'm a CEO of Baykar, and Baykar is a research and manufacturing company based in Istanbul. And in the last 20 years, we are investing heavily on just unmanned systems. And we started with small size products, and day by day, year by year, we moved on larger scale products, and we are moving on that way. So you kind of see the portfolio of elements, portfolio of platforms. When we talk about UAV, it's actually a systems of systems. Platform is just an element of it. The platforms are really at the forefront, but actually they are just the element of the system. There's a huge network infrastructure that you need to develop, and all this communications and sensors and ground elements as well. And so we, from mini scale to strategic high altitude scale, we have a portfolio of systems, and all of these products that you see on the slide are actively in serial production. Of course, Bayraktar TB2 is active in the last 5 years, and it's recording huge amount of flight hours and used inside and outside of Turkey. And now we are as well now with Akıncı, which is a strategic class platform, and which is in serial production as well. So when we look at Bayraktar TB2, it has been heavily used in the recent conflicts, and it is really a game changer and force multiplier platform, as it has a really, the performance to cost ratio of this performance divided by cost ratio is really very, very high. I will briefly maybe touch onto that. And also it's been heavily used, and it's been updated daily almost. So and the field and the environment that is being used is a very active environment. The dynamics are changing daily, so you really need to keep the systems up to date and be responsive and go on with your flights without any interruption. So that's really difference that makes Bayraktar TB2 actually this much attractive as a product. And we have accumulated more than 300,000 hours with this platform. It's flying minimum 10,000 hours per month, which is just by itself it is flying way more than the complete air fleet of Turkey in the military area. So that's the reason. So here on the slide you see our end users. It's been operational in all of these countries, and also in Turkey, also in civilian area. We are actively involved in firefighting activities and sea patrol activities as well, along with military use. So and another very essential element, this was, I just put this slide because it was a lot on the news. These are all critical subsystems of this platform. So it's a totally tailor-made, and that's the way it is that differentiates this industry from automotive. It's impossible for you to just go out in the market and collect the subsystems and assemble them and come up with a performing product, as the standards and the industry is not that much deeply well established. So here you see all these critical subsystems, and by the way, none of them are can be procured by any Turkish company from outside of Turkey. So all of these items are tailor-made and very highly high-tech elements that make this product a reliable platform. And here you see the concept that how it's being used. You see the elements of ground elements, how these are connected to each other with the ground network infrastructure. So it's kind of the UAV is just the element there flying and performing its mission. And then I would like to talk briefly about our new upcoming product. It's in serial production, flying lots of times daily right now, and so it's a built upon our experiences, and it's a strategic class platform with 2 turbine engines, which can carry about 1.5 tons of payload weight, which can carry, in Turkey, there is a huge variety of smart munitions, huge variety of electronic warfare payloads. So it's kind of a flagship product that combines all these main elements that are widely available in the Turkish industry. So it is a really promising technology right now for Turkey. And this platform can fly up to 40,000 feet, and it has a more than triple redundancy, and it has artificial intelligence, about 4 artificial intelligence computers. I mean, it's such a sophisticated system that you need artificial intelligence to conduct and to make it to take it to a high level of reliability. That's a very critical element for us, and it is equipped with ISR radar and beyond line of sight capabilities. So I would just point to your remarks, Mr. Meral, about how this thing really, how these technologies are kind of game changers on the field. Actually, there is a cycle. The conditions of the field is changing daily, so you really need to adapt to that and make innovations and provide solutions almost daily, and fine-tune these things so that they can, without any interruption, continue their operations. And of course, within Turkey and outside of close border of Turkey, it's really very hot, and this technology is really, are very critical for Turkey for its ongoing peace operations. And on all these operations, Operation Eurofleet Shield or Olive Branch or Spring Shield, these were the key elements. Bayraktar TB2 was the key element there, even though there were a lot of adverse conditions, whether it be weather, whether it be electronic warfare environment. And then recently in the Nagorno-Karabakh, it was kind of, the operations, the initial operations was kind of, you can call them asymmetric operations, but then in the Idlib operation, it was kind of semi-conventional because there were air defense systems there. And then in the Nagorno-Karabakh as well, we call it Tek Vatan Operation, one nation operation of Azerbaijan to save its land. There as well, it was a conventional type of environment, and then UAVs really proved themselves there very effectively. From open sources, there are a lot of analysis ongoing, a lot of discussions are ongoing. So it's it really changed the doctrine on how you think about it. So it's not the number of assets that you have. It's kind of how much you are effective with your use of the technology. Do you dominate it, and can you adapt it and use for your own benefit? And so the result there is about 70% of the targets were demolished directly by Bayraktar TB2, and then the rest, most of them were as well detected and recognized with the support of these technologies. And the things that I'm talking about, you see it on this slide. So we have the conditions of today and then tomorrow. So it's a really ongoing and changing environment, and you will see the use of these systems and the capabilities increasing day by day, having their places in a much more solid manner. And this slide, I just, from the open sources, we kind of make this analysis. Just, it's kind of it shows why this, our systems are kind of right now attractive, and on the so the reason is it's about reliability. So you might have these technologies, and these new technologies, by the way, are fragile. So it's not like very robust and very well established. It's not like like 20-30 years of development. But so the new technology is always fragile. But then it comes to the point, okay, is this new technology is affordable? Can you use it in a reliable fashion? And we analyze all these flash statistics of especially the Western systems, American systems, as they are published. And we noticed that, we achieved the reliability level compared to Western systems in a much more short period of years. So that's the reason. And right now, by the way, UAVs are almost surpassing the reliability of fighter jets. And when you look at F-16s, you have a mean time between failure of mishap A and B about 34,000 hours. So UAVs now achieved that level. So this is very significant. So I don't want to extend and take more of your time. Maybe we can discuss more. So
thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you so much, Haluk Bey. I mean, it's been really fascinating to see how you were able to achieve something remarkable in such a short amount of time. You already hinted on a fundamental aspect of advancement of defense technologies, that is how the government or the state chooses to engage, support, or enable, and why it seeks to enable and basically fund such research and development and deployments. So to that extent, I think another fascinating story is the changes that we have observed in Turkish defense and security policy and foreign policy, and also the push to nationalize Turkish defense industry, right? This was an old topic in Turkish politics. So anybody who's followed Turkey for 30, 40 years will tell you there have been a lot of moments in Turkish history. Haluk Bey already mentioned the Cyprus issue in late 70s and 80s, questions with the drones with Israel and etc. There have been a lot of moments where Turkish governments talked about nationalizing Turkish defense, but it seemed to be possible at this conjuncture with a strong push. Now we have Dr. Can Kasapoglu, who is a leading observer of Turkish defense, and he's as an academic, he's covered a lot of these issues. Can, what are some of the things that you observed about how Turkish defense and security policies shifted its relationship with the industry and supporting this critical new technologies and deploying it? Turkey evolved a lot in this journey, as well as the technology and the industry.
Well, Ziya, thank you. And I'd like to extend thanks to RUSI and all the panelists for this very timely, really great and really needed event on elaborating the key aspects of Turkish drone technologies and the future horizons. Well, first as we are talking about Turkish drones, we should also open a chapter to shed light on the Turkish way of drone warfare, because this important technology, coupled with critical concepts of operations and critical operational art, actually paved the ground for the success story that was well summarized by Haluk Bey. In each operation, starting from Euphrates Shield, but especially with the Olive Branch, then Spring Shield, which was a punitive operation by the beginning of 2020 against the Syrian Arab Army, following the killing of 36 Turkish troops in the Idlib countryside. And then recently in Nagorno-Karabakh war, we observed certain trends with the Turkish way of drone warfare. The first stage, let's say the first breakthrough, was the integration of land-based fire support with drone technologies. This is actually where, as Haluk Bey mentioned, that drones were force multipliers, because an artillery regiment or a multiple launch rocket systems detachment with and without drone technology for ISR missions and also battle damage assessment were two different pieces, actually. So that integration paid off, and it paid off through combat-proven cases in Syria, in Libya, and in northern Iraq. Secondly, especially starting with the Operation Spring Shield, we saw that Turkish drone technology took out an important proportion of Syrian Arab Army's northern deployments, including air defense assets. So drones used as suppression of enemy air defenses was also a breakthrough in operational art. Well, thirdly, we saw that drones were also used to pinpoint the target land warfare elements, starting with Operation Euphrates Shield, then emanating in Operation Olive Branch, then Spring Shield, and in Nagorno-Karabakh, the Azerbaijani forces were able to inflict billions of dollars worth casualties on the Armenian occupation formations, which would take the Russian Federation and other patrons of the Armenian military to invest an unbearable effort to rebuild the Armenian forces. Well, very lastly, both in the Turkish case and in the Azerbaijani case, drone footage were used as munitions for wider, broader information operations. In the digital sphere of modern battlefield and digital sphere of 21st century battle space is one of the key determining and decisive aspect of modern conflict. Well, it translated into military policy and foreign policy, as you rightly asked, in certain ways. First, in the Nagorno-Karabakh war, we saw that Turkey is not only selling drones, but also transferring concepts of operations, because in many ways, the Azerbaijani operational art followed the footsteps, even mimicked the footsteps in some ways, the Turkish operations in Syria, especially Operation Spring Shield, the punitive operation that I mentioned vis-a-vis the Syrian Arab Army, in terms of using drones as information operations assets. Check how the Azerbaijani Ministry of Defense Twitter account actually broadcasted live drone footage from the battleground to fight the Armenian political lexicon in the informational sphere, to use drones to take out the Armenian air defenses, so the Azerbaijani close air support platforms could come into play to support the Azerbaijani advance, but also using drones not only as force multipliers, but decisive weaponry to tilt the balance of the war in the battleground. I'm not saying that, the Turkish industry is not saying that only. Uzi Rubin, the founding father of the Israeli Arrow and other related air defense systems programs, he called that the Karabakh War was the first war that was won by unmanned aerial systems in air-ground operations. So concepts of operations transfers married to the weaponry transfer is the first and foremost aspect. I can say that Ankara translated this new technology and related concepts into its foreign policy agenda. Secondly, the Turkish military in the 21st century, especially in the 2020s, is a different beast when compared to 1990s and before. Now, as the Turkish doctrinal order of battle, we are talking about an expeditionary posture. When I call Turkish armed forces, I also have to include in that broader framework the contingents in Syria, Libya, Somalia, the Horn of Africa, Qatar, the Gulf, the Balkans, Cyprus, East Med, so on. So drones, both by minimizing casualties and also compensating for actually forward deploying personnel in high-risk areas, is an integral part of Turkey's new expeditionary military posture. Yet another important aspect that Turkey translates this new technology into military and security policy is counterterrorism operations. So apart from many aspects that pertain to area control, that Turkey needed brigade-sized formations once upon a time, actually Turkey runs a pinpoint targeted killing program within its counterterrorism operations framework, where recently Sofi Nurettin, a critical conduit between the Syrian Ba'ath regime and its Mukhabarat and the PKK terrorist organization, and one of the founder figures of the terrorist organization's build-up in northern Syria, was killed by a joint operation by the Turkish intelligence and the Turkish armed forces beyond Turkey's borders. So that also was enabled by Turkey's drone technology, and this is not a sporadic event. Turkey systematically takes out the terrorist ringleaders of PKK, and this is something enabled by drone operations. If we a little bit zoom out from military policy and come to high politics and foreign policy decision making, we also see 3 points shining bright in Ankara's view of drone technologies, robotic warfare, and how to navigate through the new, say, landscape of the 21st century defense technologies. The first is the defense economics aspects, of course. Drone sales are, yes, they are lucrative things. They worth millions of dollars for Turkey right now, but they are also strategic asset. Turkey is selling drones to Ukraine at a time when the Ukrainian military is running anti-terrorism operations in the eastern part of the country, is actually practically more than, you know, its cost bill. It is more than what it's worth on the signed contract. Turkey is the one and only NATO nation that provides such capability to the Ukrainian military. Likewise, looking at the Polish acquisition very recently, it is the Turkish defense industry that looms large as the one and only NATO ecosystem that provides the Polish military with such capability and with a future horizon. Because keep in mind that every single nation that procured Bayraktar TB2 is a natural candidate for Akıncı exports also. And every single nation that's going to procure Akıncı in the foreseeable future will be a natural candidate for Turkey's next up co-developed with the Ukrainian technology, turbojet unmanned aerial system. So this defense economics and defense economics as a foreign policy tool to enter foreign weapons market with strategic systems is really important. But the second point that I like to mention is that with this combat-proven capability, the Turkish armed forces and Turkish political decision makers are equipped with an asset that I wouldn't say motivate them, but enables them to push the military option button in high-risk areas. So think about the Turkish military without drone capability and think that and assume that Operation Spring Shield had to be run without any unmanned systems operating in Syrian skies. We all know that a downed and captured pilot from the Russian Sukhoi-24 incident, from the Jordanian operations against ISIS, from the Syrian Arab Air Force, is not only a casualty, but is also a political hostage in the hostile territory. So it is actually compensating for manned aircraft in hostile airspace. And last point, which I'm going to stop here and leave the stage for other colleagues of mine. Actually, the future horizons of Turkish defense industry is also encouraging, I think, Turkish political decision makers for more aspirant for more ambitious national defense strategies. Akıncı recently, if I'm mistaken, Haluk Bey can just correct, Akıncı just completed test fires with MAMTI, a much heavier munition than MAM-L that was used by Bayraktar TB2. What does it mean for non-military followers of us right now? It means that all the blast radius and explosions that you saw from Karabakh or from the Syrian battleground, you know, just imagine 4 or 5 times larger of them, which can take out more massive formations or more massive platforms. Very recently in the Seawolf 21 drills, Turkey just tested and test fire its unmanned maritime vehicle, ULAK. Turkey also runs a broad UGV proliferation program for its land warfare capabilities. So these are also encouraging, I think, factors for Turkish strategic community like us and Turkish foreign policy and national security policy makers for more aspirant, more ambitious goals in the forthcoming decades. So I think it is also, as a final line, drone technology has also created a strategic culture of its own for the Turkish strategic community, which was on the losing side of the 20th century when it comes to defense technologies. And surfing on of this new wave of robotic systems is an integral part also of Turkish techno-nationalism. And techno-nationalism is one of the key drivers of Turkish foreign policy in I would say, 21st century, especially nowadays. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. I mean, I was taken by with how much your strategic context actually, dominated your decoding and analysis of evolving nature of Turkish defense policy, and also how these new technologies are impacting even the policy itself. Now that you have that capability, you have seen its successes in Syria and Karabakh and other theaters. Obviously, that's going to alter how we approach problems and crises and what you think is possible and available. And that is going to be a really important question for us. But now I want to turn to Ash, who's based at the Khalifa University in Abu Dhabi, because as both Haluk and John mentioned, this is not just simply a conversation on defense technology. This has huge strategic implications for the region and for NATO, for us, for the UK, and etc. But Ash, from a perspective of states in the Middle East, where you are based and you observe a lot of it, and you had a career that spanned across the region, you worked in defense and security issues. What are some of the key implications of this that you observed from outside of Turkey? Obviously, with Haluk and with John, we heard the Turkish perspective and the Turkish story and increasing strategic framework. But from your perspective, as somebody who's observed Turkey in other countries in the region from a defense and security perspective, what has changed for them in Turkey's renewed capabilities and assertion and very effective use of them? And what do you see the implications of this would be for its immediate region?
Thanks, Ziya Bey, and thanks for the preceding speakers and for RUSI and for inviting me to this event. I can't speak for any of the governments or countries in the region in particular, so I can only give some general impressions based on my previous experience and time in the region. Look, clearly there is a belief, a perception, and no small amount of resignation that Turkey has emerged as a major drone power in the region. This stems not just from, although I'll talk about this in a little bit, the operational use of drones, but the fact that they are indigenously designed and locally built is very significant in a regional context, and particularly for some of Turkey's erstwhile rivals in the region, that they are able to both pursue this, as Haluk Bey talked about, this systemic effort in a particular and important critical technology area, and reach a very successful conclusion with that strategic effort. So that's been met with some resignation in the region amongst Turkey's rivals, as I said. What I would say is I don't think there's a great deal of nuance in the assessments about what Turkey has actually done and achieved, and John Bey just then laid it all out and provided some of that nuance and that operational nuance. I think there's a fixation with drone strikes and the ability for what drones can do in terms of precision strike, and some of the other attributes, performance attributes of Turkey's drones, as Can Bey was mentioning then, such as in a more supportive role for artillery, for example, is kind of missed in the discussion here. So and also I think there's a misunderstanding about how Turkey got to where it got to, as we heard in the first contribution there from Haluk Bey. This was almost a generational effort. This is not something that could be achieved in a short time. So I think there was some surprise in Turkey's rapid elevation into being a drone power, but a lack of context about how long it actually took to get there. And actually, the real effort that if you want to become a leader in a particular technology area, quite the effort that needs to go into that. It's not a quick fix. So I think that's been a surprise for some states in the region. I would say that it was really Operation Spring Shield that really put Turkey's drone capability on the map throughout the region. Although other drone operations previous to that were indications, I think, to states in the region that Turkey was gaining some serious military capability in that area. But really, Spring Shield, and then following that, the events in Libya against the Libyan National Army, and then following that, Nagorno-Karabakh. I think there was a sequence of successful usage of drones. Although, as I say, I think the understanding of what the drones were actually doing in those conflicts were lacking adequate nuance and a fixation around their ability to strike armor, for example, whereas actually their contribution in other areas was quite important. But on the other side, there's the more naysayers point to sort of high attrition of the Bayraktar TB2, not just in the spring Operation Spring Shield, but in the weeks preceding that as well, and lack of understanding, as Haluk Bey said, the cost performance element to this, that I think is a fair trade-off to any level of attrition in these tactical systems. And there's another side to this which sort of moves away from kind of the material element, and that is the prestige, I think, that Turkey has acquired through a successful indigenous drone capability. The status and prestige that Turkey's derived from that is seen as, I wouldn't say there's jealousy about it, but certainly instead of a sort of soft power tool of Turkish soap operas, it's a very much a hard power status element that Turkey has derived from demonstrating both capable locally designed and built indigenous systems that are both proven on the battlefield, and clearly other states want to purchase and buy these systems. But beyond that, I think there's a growing status attached to being a drone power. And when I mean drone power, I don't just mean importing drones and using them and all the restrictions and restraints that come with that, but as a state that's able, for the most part, although there are some limitations on some of the subsystems that can be indigenously built, but I guess that's changing quite rapidly in the future. A drone power that's able to both build and use their own systems, and there's a status and prestige that comes with that, and those that aren't able to do that have a loss of status and prestige in the region. And I think that's quite an important element. And also, I think there's a fear that Turkey will use the drones that it's producing to win friends. I don't know whether that fear is well placed or not, I don't think relationships are built on one defence sale. That's not. I don't think that's the cornerstone of any relationship, but it can be an important element. And I think drones may be an important part of building up Turkey's relations with other states. It's non-negligible. I think it's non-trivial. I think there's a fear that Turkey will be able to build up relationships with states at the disadvantage of other states in this region. But on the other hand, a gentle thawing of some of relations between Turkey and some of the GCC states may actually open up Turkish drones to regional customers. So it may go the other way as well. That's my perception from the region.
Thank you so much, Ash. I mean, I quite actually appreciated your point about how these capabilities provide a country a global prestige and a standing beyond its immediate region, right? It's almost like, the thresholds that have been reached with 5th generation jet. You enter a new league now, or even nuclear arms and other technological leaps that we observed in tech, or when the tanks emerged from horse cavalry to the tanks. This is another industrial leap. And we are thrilled to have Ulrike Franke with us, who's from the European Council of Foreign Relations, who have observed this phenomenon globally, and both the possibilities and the weaknesses and the shortcomings of actually giving drones and drone technology such an important place in today's and tomorrow's warfare. Ulrike, when you listen to these conversations on how Turkish experience have evolved and developed, both technologically, both in terms of defense and security policy, and then what it meant for regional actors, what are your perceptions and thoughts on where Turkey fits in the global picture, right? So this is not just Turkey pursuing this, and Turkey's learning lessons on so many fronts, which are already established, and some countries are already facing limitations of drone and remote warfare capabilities, right? Do you solve everything by drones? What can you solve by drones? What are the implications that emerge from these? Before Ulrike starts answering them, your questions are coming from the Q&A function. Please keep sending them. And I know Haluk Bey is answering some of you, which is great. So what I'll do is I'll read some of the key questions and bring them together and open it up for all of the group to discuss. Hopefully we'll have 30 minutes or so after Ulrike to unpack some of these and have a conversation among the panelists. But do keep writing your questions, and our speakers might answer you directly as well. Or if not, I will read them and we will discuss them together. Ulrike.
Thanks a lot, Ziya, and good afternoon from London. Thanks so much for having me in this great discussion. And I already learned a lot, and there were a lot of great points that I would love to pick up on in the Q&A. So I'm not here as an expert on Turkish drones, as most of the other panelists are, but indeed as someone who has kind of observed the development of drones and global drone proliferation over the last, well, at least 10 years or so. And so I wanted to make kind of 3 brief points on where I see Turkey's position in the global market, in Europe, and also within NATO. And so I guess the first point I want to make, and this has already come through, I guess, in the presentations that we've heard so far, but I think it's worth underlining, is that Turkey really has become an important player in the global drone market. And this is actually quite striking, because when you look at the world, the global drone market, there are basically 4 states that really matter on drone development and drone export. First of all, the United States and Israel. And these 2 really have been leading for decades and had a de facto monopoly on advanced and especially armed drones for, let's say, a good decade or so. And then China and Turkey. And these are really the new kids on the block, not so new anymore, I guess. But what's interesting about both China and Turkey is that both of them have had a significant impact on drone proliferation, because they were willing and are willing to export drones. Because when it was just the United States and Israel, they really had a de facto monopoly on the larger sophisticated systems and on armed drones. And they were the ones who basically decided who could get armed drones in the world. And incidentally, they decided it would be very few actors. The US basically only exported to the UK. We're in discussion with a few other NATO countries, but that never really amounted to much. And similarly in Israel. And it is really this monopoly and this reticence to export that motivated armed drones development elsewhere, including in Turkey, as we heard earlier. And since drones, maybe contrary to, say, nuclear weapons, aren't that difficult to produce. I mean, it's not easy, but it is still doable by mid-sized powers. Certainly, several countries managed to do so by investing quite a bit and by putting their mind to it in the way that Turkey did. And so now, as I said, China and Turkey really have become important drone exporters. I haven't checked all the exports that Turkey has done, but it was already mentioned, Turkey has exported drones to Ukraine, Qatar, Tunisia, Azerbaijan, and then very recently, as has been mentioned, it has announced that it is exporting armed drones to Poland as the very first NATO country, other NATO country. And what I found also quite interesting in this context is that there have been all of these reports about Turkey, for example, wanting to develop a supersonic drone, that it wants to have the first unmanned fighter jet by 2023. Some of these things may be, announcement, aspirations, plans, and this may not necessarily happen or in this time frame, but it kind of shows Turkey's place and Turkey's ambition. And I would say, looking at this with a European mindset, this is to some extent slightly embarrassing to the other Europeans. Because, the Europeans really have been trying or wanting to develop armed drones, and this development has stalled for a number of reasons. It's not so much that they really want to and cannot, but they haven't managed to. And Turkey has definitely showed that, a mid-sized power, if it puts its mind and its money to it, can develop, very sophisticated armed drones. So yeah, from a European point of view, bit embarrassing, I would say. The second point that I think is worth noting is that the number of drones, and especially armed drones, that Turkey reportedly has is strikingly high in comparison with other states. And as it was already mentioned, it also uses drones differently, which I think is very important. But looking at the numbers, I mean, don't quote me on the exact numbers, it's kind of difficult to state exactly, but there are reports that Turkey has 140 or more armed drones. That is a lot. And when you think about this, I don't know to what extent the people listening here know this, but the UK uses 10 armed drones. Germany has been discussing whether or not to lease 5 armed drones for 10 years. So well over 100 is really huge in comparison. I couldn't quite find the Israeli numbers. I think they are lower, although maybe similar. The US numbers are higher, but then it's the US. So the US Air Force alone has 300 or so Reaper drones. But you can kind of see, where Turkey fits in there, and this is quite striking. Plus, Turkey has loitering munition, and to me, this really shows a few things. I mean, number one, Turkey definitely put its money and effort in drones in a way that other states just did not. Number two, armed drones clearly fit the kind of operations that Turkey is doing and wants to do, and we've already heard about Syria and others. And then number three, Turkey, I think, is quite leading in its new ways of using drones in this kind of conventional operations in combination with land systems, in combination with artillery. This is quite different from, for instance, the US and the UK use of drones in areas where it has full air dominance, where drones are kind of the main asset, all these type of things. So that's I think, worth noting. And then the kind of final and third point is a bit more political. I think what's worth noting is that the Turkish drone development has definitely taken place against the backdrop of the Turkish alienation from NATO. I mean, no one here, I guess, is surprised when I point out that relations between Turkey and many, if not all, of the NATO states have been difficult, and we've seen, you know, the NATO summit in December 2020 that was pretty disastrous. And of course, the biggest issues here have been the acquisition of the S-400 air systems from air defense systems from Russia, and the conflict in the Mediterranean with Greece, and to some extent also France. But I actually think that the Turkish drone development fits in here quite a bit, or has developed against this background. How so? I mean, number one, the impetus for Turkey to become such a big drone player was, as has now been said several times, that it couldn't get drones from others, including, you know, NATO member and NATO partner United States. Again, you know, this wasn't only a Turkish problem, but still. I also think that national pride and, as it was said, prestige really matters here, because Turkey wanted to show that it could be a leading drone producer. And I think what fits in here quite perfectly is the recent announcement that Turkey is kind of thinking about using armed drones on Turkey's future landing helicopter dock instead of F-35. And as you well know, Turkey is no longer an F-35 nation because of the S-400 issue. And so there is this element, I think, this kind of signaling to NATO saying, you know what, we can do this by ourselves differently. We aren't as dependent as you may think. So this is I think where the prestige element is really important, and this element of, you know, being the only other NATO country than the US able to produce and use these systems. So I'll keep it there because I really want to go into the discussion.
Thank you so much, Ulrike. These are all very well made points. So there are a few questions that are coming, and I know Haluk is engaging with some of you directly, but the 2-3 or questions kind of touched on the strategic implications of both the export of the product, but also the import of technologies and technology sharing and etc. There's been a question on whether or not Turkey was talking to Saudi Arabia, and we've already mentioned the fact that Poland is now purchasing drones. Ukraine case is there, and also Ash, you mentioned that if there was some sort of easing of Turkey, GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council kind of countries relationship, there could actually very well be more interest on Turkish defense technology in the Gulf region. And obviously they're also watching this very closely. They have similar calculations. But Haluk and Can, I mean, I think first I'll start with you, but I'll bring in Ulrike and Ash as well too. And I appreciate that, as you rightfully said, Haluk Bey, to one of the questions, you know, obviously you are a businessman, you direct a company. So, you know, the political arena is not your decision making. So what you do is what you do. But it seems to me there is so much of geopolitics that gets entangled in the scope for a company like you, right? So you obviously, as a company, want to sell this great product, and there is a lot of interest, but then who buys it, when they buy it, what they do with it, poses a lot of questions and perceptions and conversations. Like Ukraine purchase got already a reaction from Russia, right? Already a threat from the Russian foreign minister, you know, and Russian officials. But Poland, for example, has been remarkably historic, a lot muted reactions by others to it, but maybe some Gulf countries, and they're observing too. And both for you and Can, how do you think as a company, but also as a defense strategic community, Turkey is going to negotiate this very complex issue of geostrategy, geopolitics, new technologies, or is it going to be much more guarded, Turkey capability shared only with limited number of allies? Or is Turkey going to advance this more and actually say, I want to engage with everybody. I want to work with NATO, I want to work with Russia. So how is Turkey going to manage this complex geostrategic calculation?
So I think, you know, as you say, the export of this technology is actually kind of creates a strategic bond between countries as well, as it's really very high tech. For Ukraine example, I could say countries like US, China, Israel denied to sell Ukraine armed UAVs due to, I don't know what type of concerns, but Turkey was the only country to accept to sell Ukraine this technology. And we as well buy our Akıncı drones turbine engines from Ukraine. So it's a complementary relationship. It's a relationship between two friendly countries, and which both sides benefit from that cooperation. So Turkey does not have huge budgets as US do, or as Russia do, or as China do, but rather Turkey actually, I think, Turkey has big ambitions, on this technological attempts. And I look at it that way, it's a matter of technological innovation and it's huge resources. So it's essential for Turkey to ally and cooperate with friendly nations where this relationship is based on mutually, not unilaterally, where both sides have benefits on it. So with Poland as well, Turkey has defense relationship. Turkey procures some items and equipments and materials from Poland. So I think with country, and there is a huge, and also the biggest advantage of, as I told you, it's very fragile systems. I would tell you, 30 years ago, Turkey bought Gnat drones from US. Gnat is the previous version of Predator drones. And average flight hours of each of these drones is 100 hours. Can you imagine? You pay millions of dollars and you fly them on average 100 hours before scrap. So this is beyond, so the thing is, if you really don't have the means to sustain the systems from logistics or development, if you cannot establish that cycle, you can't benefit from these systems. And so wherever Turkey builds a relationship, whether it be Ukraine or Poland or Azerbaijan or with Qatar or other countries, we don't build a one-sided relationship. These are totally software-based, sophisticated systems, millions of codes in it, and they're embedded. Even one line of code can make them be not available for use for that nation if it's one-sided. You don't know what's inside. So you shall be open and cooperative while establishing these relationships. And of course, it's not like, there is all sorts of export licensing applications. There are some filters, and they look at the use and how it's being benefited. So this is I think, I get it that way. And the other thing also I would love to mention, and this is, I think, critical and misunderstood. I think it's based on some perceptions about drones that are based on, some Western news, I don't know, on different countries. Turkey is using this technology in a very delicate way. I would give you an example with Operation Olive Branch. You cannot show just, and everything is on the media, on the YouTube or social media. There is no single evidence, event that Turkey attempted to designate civilians. Drones give you the potential to differentiate between the terrorist and a civilian very clearly, very clearly. If you don't have that technology, imagine you are firing to the blind, in a blind way, and it's very risky. And it's not precise. I mean, this technology, with this drones, you can now, with laser-guided missiles, within centimeters accuracy you have. So this gives you the advantage of eliminating collateral damage totally. And there is no single incidence that I am aware that Turkey used this. Turkey is so delicate that they eliminate total collateral damage. If there was a single evidence, it would be big time on the world media against Turkey on this current, condition actually. So I think this is a very, that side is also very sensitive, but drones really gives you the advantage to, have a clear image of the field. So that's my brief view on it.
Thank you. John?
Thank you, Ziya. Well, actually, that's a great question, because that question is pertaining to a very, niche area. Turkey has been a weapons importer for decades. It had an important military power. Its military power actually changed many, say, tricky balances on the battleground, starting from 1974 Cyprus intervention through the cross-border operations of the 1990s. Yet Turkey as a weapons exporter country, not only a weapons of exporter country, Turkey as a critical game changer weaponry exporting country is a new thing for us. So I think we are more than, determining a policy priority on that. We are learning from the government's steps, and I think also the Turkish government is trying to decide what kind of weapons exporter Turkey wants to be, alongside with the industry. So in this respect, I think we got two categorical problems to address. One is tech sharing, technology sharing. Haluk Bey mentioned something very rightly, and he gave a very telling example. He mentioned that Turkey is a mid-sized economy. We don't have much money to just like go and buy whatever we need in terms of subsystems and technologies. And secondly, because of the geopolitical sensibilities that you have mentioned, Turkey had lots of hardships when it comes to receiving technology. So I think when it comes to technology sharing, mutual beneficial relationships will shape Turkey's willingness, if you like, to share its critical drone technology. Ukraine looms large as a very illuminating example in this respect. Based on the Soviet cumulative know-how, Ukraine, especially when it comes to aerospace engine and aerospace power packs, has a lot to offer to Turkish defense industries. Baykar is one of the key actors benefiting from the Ukrainian know-how in this segment. And also Ukraine is benefiting from Turkish drone warfare know-how. So I think when it comes to tech sharing, Turkey would go for mutual beneficial relationships like it has been developing with Ukraine. When it comes to off-the-shelf sales, I think Turkey wouldn't want to be something like China, that your drones and systems would end up in third parties like unmanned groups like the Lebanese Hezbollah through sales to Iran. But Turkey gonna be somewhere between the Russian Federation and France, definitely not Germany. Tunisia is a good example of that. Qatar is a good example of that. I think with end user sensibilities, Turkey gonna be a generous arms exporter when it comes to off-the-shelf sales. The tricky part is foreign internal defense and foreign military assistance. Libya is an interesting example in this case. Azerbaijan is yet another interesting example. And this is the part, especially Turkish drone sales and drone transfers alongside concept transfers to allies for military assistance in ongoing armed conflicts. This is also an area that we have to keep an eye on. Last part that I'd like to mention is that the ecosystem emphasis that both Haluk Bey and I tried to highlight in our initial remarks. Be it Baykar, be it TUSAŞ, when a Turkish drone manufacturer enters a foreign weapons market, like Tunisia, like Poland, like Ukraine, it paves the ground for others to follow the steps. Like the pinpoint accuracy that Mr. Bayraktar was pointing out, we owe this to Roketsan, and Roketsan made smart munitions. We also owe this success to Aselsan made state-of-the-art sensors. And when Turkey, faced arms restrictions that for instance we have experienced with Canada after the Karabakh War, immediately these actors come into the play, compensating for the loss emanating from that kind of restrictions. So we should also grasp the very fact that it is not only ecosystem when it comes to capability development, but also for weapon sales. We are talking about the ecosystem. Be it TUSAŞ, be it Bayraktar, once they enter a foreign weapon market, you have to assume that Roketsan gonna follow on, Aselsan gonna follow on, other actors from the Turkish ecosystem gonna follow on. So this, I think, is a good telltale indicator for analysts and observers like us to grasp the trajectory and patterns of Turkey's arms sales. But in a nutshell, what kind of weapons exporter Turkey gonna be? That's the million-dollar question. And my guess is away from Germany, somewhere between France and the Russian Federation, when it comes to the willingness to share its critical military technologies.
Yeah, thank you, John. I think I particularly appreciate your point that we have to understand how Turkish defense exports and capabilities and production is actually spreading to a really broad range of products, not just drones, and how they play themselves out in the next 5-10 years is going to be very fascinating to observe, because even small arms, we haven't discussed much, ammunition, and some of the high precision missiles, but electronic warfare, as Haluk Bey mentioned, which I think in the Syria, when Turkey decided to respond to the killing of Turkish soldiers, what it did in electronic warfare, as well as drones and joint fires, the capacity to use all of that complex system, I think that was operationally, there was something very commendable to observe. But Ulrike and Ash, I want to merge a couple of the 2-3 questions that came along these lines. Obviously, when you have these technologies that are being used more widely than ever before, right, all around the world, for everything from intelligence and reconnaissance to counterterrorism operations to humanitarian operations, there's a lot that we have learned, and maybe didn't learn, about also the limits of these and implications of these, right? So there's been quite a big discussion during the war on terror on the use of unmanned vehicles for example, precision strikes against terror suspects, right? Because we realize international law and our frameworks were not necessarily ready to deal with this new technology. And now artificial intelligence, as we already heard, is already in practice one way or another. It is going to alter a bit more, and implications of it on the field. I mean, there have been a couple of questions saying, will this actually escalate the conflicts and crises in the Middle East? For example, in the Karabakh question, I mean, did it escalate, or did it actually shift it, or did it cause a strategic outcome? But what are the limits of this, and what are some of the new legal, ethical, or practical questions that are emerging as we think about the successes of Turkey in the bigger picture, both regionally but also globally?
Sure. I mean, that's obviously a huge question, and you can mention many things. I mean, I guess what we're currently seeing, which is actually quite interesting, is that drones and armed drones have been on the battlefields for, well, 20 years now, pretty much. I mean, since the kind of modern drones were armed in 2001. And their development very much came out of the war on terror. I mean, armed drones were actually armed just before 9/11 in the US, but the kind of way that they became more widespread and were used was very much in the context of the war on terror and the kind of operations where the country that used drones had aerial dominance. It was very much about, kind of specific strikes against targets that couldn't fight back, at least not against drones. And what we're seeing right now is a change in this. And I think Nagorno-Karabakh actually was the first, or one of the first examples of this, where drones started to play a role in a state against state conflict, in a conventional military conflict. And so now a lot of actors are trying to figure out, A, how to use the existing systems, the kind of, Reaper type systems in such conflicts, and B, how to further develop, so technologically develop systems that can be used in peer-to-peer confrontations. And if you look at the second thing, here we're thinking about elements like, how do we make drones less vulnerable? So for example, make them more stealthy, potentially make them defend themselves. So now we're talking kind of air-to-air operations and drone dogfights. And yeah, so I guess the question really is for a number of countries whether they can manage to develop drones in a way that they become or remain useful in these future operations. And it strikes me that that's something that the US is definitely doing, and we see a lot about kind of updating and modernizing the Reaper, for example, with AI and autonomy. Autonomy is another development. But also indeed in Turkey, I mean, statements such as we may want to use this system on an aircraft carrier, a kind of helicopter carrier. This is a new way of using drones and thinking beyond the Afghanistan, Pakistan operation. So I think that's, yeah, that I would flag that the increasing use of artificial intelligence and autonomy, I think, is a big one in this context. And here we kind of go straight into the ethical but also security policy concerns that you just mentioned. I mean, this is something I work on a lot, and I don't want to kind of go into a monologue on that, but we're definitely seeing the use of AI-enabled autonomy in a number of systems. This isn't drone specific, it's just that drones are among the very first systems where this plays a role. So this is kind of the difference, right? You can also have AI-enabled autonomous tanks or something like that. But this is definitely where we I think maybe had it, and there are ethical considerations about, you know, autonomous systems taking decisions over life and death, which are highly controversial. But there are also security policy concerns about, you know, unwanted escalation, so-called flash wars, arms races, and that kind of thing that I am looking at. But I'll keep it here because this is a big topic. So
no, thank you so much. I mean, I think it really helps for people to realize that when we talk about such advanced technologies and new technologies that can do so much, what we are discussing is so many issues, strategic and legal and moral and policy as well, how we incorporate them and how we use them. It's got huge ramifications. Ash, did you want to come in as well?
Yeah, sure. And just to follow on from that, there's almost a dozen ways I was just quickly jotting down that you could start to go down different paths with this. So I have to limit it really, and maybe just offer a reflection from the neighborhood here and say that you know, AI and autonomy is very much seen less from a less ethically problematic and more from a or very much more from a positive standpoint in terms of security gains that can be made through the use of AI, in contrast, say, to discussions in Europe, for example. I think that's that goes without saying. But I think there's a growing attraction to the idea that technology is a panacea to shortfalls, especially from countries, say, with small populations. And so the use of or the transfer to unmanned and greater autonomy in systems is seen as a way of making up for human resource shortfalls, as an ability to buy in and immediately eradicate what is a, you know, systematic weakness, and turn that actually to an advantage. So that's where a lot of the thinking I think goes into this, that the AI can make up for a fundamental weakness in size of population here.
Thank you so much, Ash, and thanks to all of our speakers. I think you have given me a lot of thought to ponder through tonight and reflect on, because I think from all of your comments, a lot of really important things emerge. One is obviously the phenomenal success of the Turkish drone story. But I think within that drone story, you are seeing a lot behind it. The policy, investment, overall defense industry, the new type of relationships between defense industry and the government, and research and development, and a foreign policy that accommodates all of these. So the Turkish story itself is extremely complex and one to follow closely. But then you also see the regional implications of it. And here, the region, Middle East, we've discussed, we mentioned Ukraine, we mentioned Poland, but as we discuss Black Sea region more and more vis-a-vis questions from within NATO about stability in the region, the 2014 Russian invasion of Ukrainian territories was a concern that we shared, and clearly Turkey shares the same concerns on Ukraine as other NATO member states do. You see a lot that Turkey sits at the intersection of, and a country like Turkey as a regional power, achieving such strategic capabilities as drones and knowing how to use them in very complex environments shows us the times that have changed. Ulrike already mentioned that, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, only a limited number of countries could do that. So could decide the parameters of policies and developments. But now this multipolar world with its regional powers that seek to assert themselves for their interest and security, we have entered a new phase, and it's going to pose a lot of questions. Operationally, how will these things play out? Where will they go next in terms of technology and use? Ethically, what are the implications of remote war fighting on populations that live in those spaces, but also how it impacts policymakers and the options that they see? Ethically, legally, and strategically. Turkey selling weapons systems to one country or not another, just like United Kingdom, just like United States, will always be a strategic calculation by the governments, not just by the defense industry. Well, if you want to engage with these conversations more, you know where to come. At RUSI, we run a lot of these webinars and seminars, and we will produce more on Turkey-related issues from now on. And many thanks again to the Circle Foundation in partnership that we were able to pull this event in partnership with them. And thanks to all of you and to speakers for taking such a long amount of time, and those who watched us live on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter. I assume my mom has already watched it as well too. She loves it when I join live calls. I will get a text soon from her. Thanks, Mom. And thanks for all of you, and hope to see you again in another webinar.